Chapter 8. Ambush at the Crossing. Bilespit held the scryer to his jaundiced eye and adjusted the focus.
10 wagons, he said. They've upped their production even more.
Above the usual stench of unwashed Kaldoran flesh, he detected the subtle smell of anticipation and, yes, fear. Like all the Stonegraves, Bilespit abhorred natural light. His warband was swaddled in thick, drab-brown wrappings that covered them from head to toe. This afforded them some protection from Sol Ar's harmful rays, but despite the recent Hallow's darkening, Bilespit could barely tolerate the brightness above ground.
"How many guard the train?"
a dumpy Kaldoran said, leaning on his maul. Bilespit lowered the scryer and regarded the foot soldier.
"Don't you mean how many guard the train, sir?" "You are only captain for this one mission," the other replied. "We all know you're operating on a trial basis, so don't get ideas beyond your station."
Bilespit considered his next words carefully, and then decided to dispense with them. Quick as a stone serpent, he caught the Stonegrave on the side of his head with a granite fist. It wasn't enough to cave in his skull, but still struck with enough force to send him sprawling into the dust.
"You mentioned my ideas. Well, that's what I think,"
Bilespit said, looking through the scryer again. The wagon train rolled along a hard-packed road, flicking clouds of graphite-coloured powder into the air. Bilespit counted 15 foot soldiers and 5 horsemen, a goodly number, but unlikely to comprise the Cuscosian elite. His warband could take them, not least because they had the element of surprise.
"Someone give that little crut a slap," he said, nodding at the unconscious figure. "We'll need every Stonegrave battle ready if we're to overpower the Cuscosian scum."
While 2 burly Stonegraves brought their comrade back from Sleepland, Bilespit assessed his warband's strength. 25 in number, armed with mauls, axes, slings and bows. The archers weren't particularly adept, but then the arrows were only there for effect, to lead the Cuscosians up the garden path, as it were. Bilespit barked his commands, and the Stonegraves obediently took up their positions, eager to avoid the fate of the recovering Kaldoran. The wagons would soon reach the ford below, where the shallow waters of the Queenswater River tumbled loudly over a jutting line of rocks that marked the shallows. The depth of the water, though diminished, would still slow the wagons down, and the Cuscosians would be exposed in the middle of the waterway.
"Odds I like,"
Bilespit thought. He observed the Stonegraves bearing slingshots, together with a number of archers, climb to higher ground, while the axemen and hammerweld took cover in willows bordering the riverbank. Now, as long as the motley bunch of rock scuttlers followed orders, the operation should proceed smoothly enough. Hopefully, it would all be over in a few minutes. Then again, the Chaos God could always fart in your face and upset the most carefully laid plans. Bilespit had come to learn this. The Cuscosians were close enough for the Stonegraves to see their features now. The Gar oxen, harnessed 4 at a time, plodded a steady rhythm as they pulled heavy wagons laden with cryonite ore. As well as sowing mischief, this raid would garner the Kaldorans some valuable resources. The first wagon entered the water without missing a hoof-fall, and it wasn't long before half the train were up to the ox's knees in water.
"Just a couple of moments more."
Bilespit cupped his rock-encrusted hands over his mouth and made a sound partway between a squawk and a rattle, the call of the pied Wrathwing, a signal his Stonegraves understood. A whipping sound accompanied the release of a volley of pebbles loosed from Kaldoran slingshots. Each found its mark, striking a Cuscosian horseman full in the face, despite their protective helmets. 4 riders fell from their mounts, either unconscious or dead. The Kaldorans loosed several arrows also, although most struck the water. A lucky pair pierced the hides of 2 oxen, to little effect. It would take more than longbows to bring these beasts down, and the Kaldorans would need them to cart the cryonite away in any case. To his credit, the mounted Cuscosian leader responded quickly and rallied his remaining soldiers behind the wagons. The wagon drivers were armed only with short swords and would not pose that great a threat, Bilespit assumed.
"Fire the second volley,"
he shouted. Another hail of stones and arrows came at the Cuscosians, but bounced uselessly off the wagons or stuck into the tarpaulins covering them. They would not pick off any more without a drawn-out siege, and the Kaldorans didn't have time for that.
"Break cover!"
Bilespit cried.
"Charge!"
Those stone graves concealed beneath the weeping willow boughs exploded forth with a battle cry on their lips, jogging with high steps through the water. 2 fell, skewered in the chest by javelins thrown from the spearmen. Bilespit had set up the ambush to catch the Cuscosians in a pincer movement. While the defenders gave their attention to the first onslaught, Bilespit's second wave caught them by surprise when they closed in from further down the bank, thus flanking the Cuscosians. 2 more fell beneath mauls wielded by the second Kaldoran wave, their long hafts making up for the Stonegrave's shortness of stature. The remainder met the Stonegraves bravely, bringing spears and swords to bear with practised precision. The Cuscosian captain alone had decapitated 2 of Bilespit's horde.
"Crud! The tide could turn in the Cuscosians' favour at this rate,"
Bilespit cursed. The captain had to be brought down. The honourable course of action would have been to engage the captain in one-to-one combat, but Bilespit wasn't honourable. Still in his position of concealment, he tapped the Stonegrave standing next to him and pointed at the captain. He raised the slingshot, took aim, and loosed a specially forged iron ball moulded with cruel spikes. The vengeful sphere found its target and passed through the captain's cheekbone, spinning the man round and exposing his flank. The missile didn't kill him, but the blow from a Kaldoran axe did. Bilespit recognised the Stonegrave that had insulted him and decided not to throw him into the slag pits upon their return to the Kaldoran stronghold. The slaying of the captain was a turning point. 3 minutes later, the Cuscosians fell back, some tripping into the water as Kaldorans swarmed over them, hacking and beating them with their weapons. Bilespit chose this moment to join the fray. He hopped down the hillside, jumped on top of a wagon, and swung his maul down upon an unarmed wagon driver. The men were easy pickings, and, once dispensed, left him time to assess the rest of the melee.
"Take them all," he yelled. "Gut every last one of 'em. Leave no survivors."
1 minute later, the last Cuscosian had fallen in the water, his skull caved in by a Kaldoran mace. Hakrish, Bilespit's second in command, waded over to him, blood dripping from both ends of his warhammer. He panted and perspired with exertion.
"How many Stonegraves did we lose?"
Bilespit inquired.
"By the looks of it, 7. 8 wounded, but not mortally,"
Hakrish replied. Bilespit nodded with satisfaction.
"Right, the job's not finished. Have the archers loose more arrows into the corpses from further back, and unload those sacks of dragon moored on the far bank. Make it look natural."
Hakrish shook his head.
"I doubt if the Cuscosians will fall for it. Since when have the Dragonians coveted Cryonite?"
"Since now," Bilespit replied. "Look at Solar and the sky. See how even the heavens grow darker, and it's only early afternoon. The black hallows puts things in the minds of men they wouldn't usually consider. All we need to do is nudge the Cuscosians in the right direction."
Hakrish shrugged. He was a foot soldier, not a tactician, and was happy to follow orders. It wasn't his place to question.
"Colon, Ekaf," Bilespit shouted. "Take 8 others and drive these wagons back up the eastern road. We must cover 15 periarchs before nightfall, and we don't want a Cuscosian counterattack to befall us."
The Stonegraves carried out their duties, loading their wounded and dead onto the wagons before setting off. Bilespit considered taking one of the whinnying horses to make the journey back more comfortable, but he wasn't a horseman and didn't want to risk a broken collarbone.
"No,"
he contemplated.
"There are things Kaldorans do well, and others not so well."
Killing and treachery were their stock in trade. Elegant pursuits such as equestrianism were just unseemly, and Bilespit would be cursed if he was going to appear unseemly.